Alabama in, Florida State out. And there's just so much smoke coming out of the Sunshine State right now about Florida State not making the college football playoff. Well, one guy that has consistently said that if Bama won out, took the SEC, that they would make it is our friend Thom Abraham. And we're going to talk to Thom here in a second about his thoughts on where everything is right now. Bama playing in the Rose Bowl against Michigan, and Florida State threatening a boycott of the Orange Bowl and more. Hey, guys, thanks for being here on the original Bama football tailgate show and the original Bama tailgate YouTube channel. A lot of originals. Like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up, and let's get this thing going. All right, there he is, coming at us from the studios of 97.7 ESPN The Zone in Huntsville. Thom Abraham, I'm Mick Gillispie. You were the guy that you kept convincing everyone, Thom, that this would happen, and it did happen. If Alabama won out, they did. Now they're in. But there's been just a lot of belly aching from Florida State, and I can't blame them. They're upset that they didn't get in. They went undefeated.
Yeah, they went undefeated. So did Liberty go undefeated. And again, it wasn't about whether or not you went undefeated. Would Alabama have gone undefeated against their schedule? They cried and moaned about the fact that Florida State went 2-0 against the SEC. Alabama went 9-0 against the SEC. So come and play that schedule, and let's see how you did. They played the number 55 most difficult schedule in the land. Alabama played the number 5. Texas played the number 2. So you go 12-1 against those types of schedules, you're going to have a seat at the table. And the bottom line was, as I had maintained for the middle of the season on, remember the old survive in advance, right? I kept saying survive in advance. Well, I had to look at it from 30,000 feet. And if you look at it from 30,000 feet and you look down and you see Atlanta and you see a 12-1 SEC champ that just beat the number 1 team in the country, you can't have a playoff without that team. So now somebody has to pay. Who pays? The middling team from Florida State playing with a second or third string quarterback. It doesn't matter if Rodemaker's in there. Doesn't matter who is in there. He doesn't play defense. And, they do have an outstanding defense, but they are right where they belong. And the fact that they're a 2-touchdown underdog to Georgia, which for some reason is ranked behind them on this poll, is, I think, very, very telling. Mick, the only thing I could wish is that I wish all the best players would play for both teams. And it's not going to be the case. There is a ton of pressure on Georgia here, because if Georgia were to get dumped by Florida State, then it would be like, there you go. We beat them too. And so on. So, Georgia needs to stomp a mud hole in them and let them know the way things roll here in the SEC. But they've already taken their top, one of their top wide receivers out. He's declared and he's opting out, the 6'7" wide receiver, Johnny, whatever his name, Taylor, whatever. And I hope, Georgia has a full complement when they play them, like when Bryce Young and Will Anderson played last year and they went and stomped K-State. So, we'll see how all of that shakes out, but they got the right 4 teams. That's the most important part. Politics aside, and I'm disappointed as, my politics are right of Genghis Khan. Okay. So I'm, to see, it was such pandering and if you were somebody that would maybe be thinking about supporting the Sanctus, if I lived in Florida still, and I have family that lives in Florida, and if the governor said that I've set $1 million aside for a potential lawsuit, I'd be like, really? I got people sleeping in the streets over here, and you put $1 million aside to set it for a lawsuit so that you can go and fight that Florida State should have been in the playoffs so that they could get whacked by 30 points by one of these other 3 teams.
Yeah, they actually, the Attorney General of Florida has announced that, they're investigating. What are you going to investigate? That you played Syracuse and Boston College and barely beat, Boston College in the championship game when everyone was watching Florida State and Louisville. You couldn't move the football. You couldn't get a first down, and that no one wanted to go to your championship game. They basically, if you would have waited outside and needed a ticket, someone would have given you one, because people didn't really care about that. The SEC, they were $450 to get in, right?
Well, not that this matters, but there were Alabama. Forget about the rest of the SEC, Georgia, everything. Alabama played 5 regular season SEC games that had larger TV audiences than the ACC championship game. 5 regular season games.
Right.
The ACC championship game had the 22nd largest audience of all the football games that were played throughout the season this year. Alabama and Georgia, 8 of their 12 games were rated, had bigger audiences than that game. Their 8 of their 12 games were in the top 50 most watched games in the country. So you're right about nobody really cares. I mean, that's the bottom line. And people say, well, it shouldn't be about that. It shouldn't be about the TV show. It should be. They were given a criteria. Bill Hancock said it. Nowhere in any of the nomenclature is the word deserve. The only word is best. And, and it's subjective. And do they get it wrong sometimes? Should they have taken Penn State instead of Ohio State a few years ago when Ohio State won that Big Ten championship and Penn State or beat Ohio State? Well, yeah, but they had 2 losses. Yeah, but they were better. You know what? They were actually better. They had 2 losses, but there were upsets happen in college football. That's the only thing they can do is try and get the 4 best. And if you look at the lines in these 2 games, right? Michigan and Alabama is almost a pick 'em now, or Michigan maybe is a 1-point favorite there. And in the game, I think Texas is a 5 or a 6-point favorite. They have got the 2 best games. And if you look at the projection, Alabama and Michigan will both be favored in the national championship game, regardless of who they play. Alabama right now is about a 3.5-point favorite over Texas if it ends up that way, and it'd be a 6.5-point favorite over Washington. And it's about the same for Michigan. So
yeah, really interesting. Yeah, right. And talking about the lines, don't forget our friends at Pearl River Resort and the Timeout Sports Lounge and Sportsbook. Go over there and play those games, or the NBA, or the NFL, or hockey, or whatever you like and want to go check out. Just do it. It's an hour and a half from Tuscaloosa, 2 hours from Birmingham. Easy to get to from a lot of places in the state of Alabama. They got the legal sports book. It's always fun to go there and hang out at the Timeout Sports Lounge. I'm with you on the fact that Florida State's a 14-point underdog. I don't think that they're going to be able to beat Georgia, even with some of Georgia's best players out. Georgia doesn't lose except to Alabama. But to me, I agree with you on just how absurd it is for Florida, to the state of Florida, to really feel like this team was robbed somehow, like they belonged in over compared to Alabama or Texas,
right,
or the other 2 teams. I mean, they played the 55th ranked schedule. They, you watch them, they didn't pass the eye test. They lost their quarterback. But to me, Tom, where the committee really put themselves in a bind is the way that they just were so lazy when they were, ranking the teams week to week. They kept leaving Alabama at 8. How many times were we like, what are you doing here?
Yeah. They
had Oregon overrated. We kept saying that as well. They were another team like Florida State that had this really weak out of schedule ranking. And then but for some reason they were ranked really high. And then when it came push to shove, now all of a sudden you're moving teams from 7 and 8 in, and you're moving a team that's been in out. And I guess it just gave that false sense of security to the Seminoles, where they really probably should have been ranked 7th or 8th from the start.
Yeah, I mean, the concept is that how can they be 4 going into their conference championship game, win their conference championship game, and then be dropped? They weren't dropped. They were boat raced, okay? At that point in time, when they were going into their conference championship games, Alabama hadn't beaten the number 1 team in the country. So maybe they were 8, to be considered then. And when Alabama beat Georgia, they dragged Texas with them because now Texas beat the team to beat the team.
Yeah.
And so now you got to look at it that way. I'd be fascinated to know if Oregon had beaten Washington, like they were a 9-point favorite in that game. Washington earned my respect. I still think they're going to get hammered, but they earned my respect in that game, that they belong in this Final Four. But if Oregon had beaten Washington, would Florida State be in then, and neither of the Pac-12 teams be in? That would be a big question. I wonder if a 1-loss Washington, they would have been eliminated by a 1-loss Oregon, who avenged their 1 loss. So I wonder in the Oregon Florida State measurement, which one would have gotten in out of that?
This was the only way they were going to be kept out. Because if Georgia had won, you just take all the unbeaten teams.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, if you're taking best, I still would be looking at Texas, to be honest with you.
But Texas's win over Alabama was really inflated by the fact that Alabama beat Georgia, which by far was the biggest win of the college football season. So now all of a sudden you got Georgia in, you got Michigan, you got Washington, and then it would just be easy to put Florida State in there and have 4 unbeaten teams, no argument at all. Once you put the one-loss team in Alabama because you had to, then the media kept on saying all year, well, Texas has to be ahead because they beat them, which, it's only counts when you beat Alabama, by the way. Yeah. But, okay. They were trying to do that last year with Tennessee. Remember, Tennessee you talk about boat race. They lost to South Carolina and Georgia. But the losses really didn't match, Alabama lost on a last-second field goal, and, they got beat pretty good. But here nor there, I think that the media set this up because they were pushing so hard to kind of have, well, if this happens, this has to happen.
Yeah. Well, and again, it kind of falls on political lines to a certain extent. There's a lot of snowflakes that are, they deserve. No, they deserve. What do you deserve? How do you know what you deserve? When you play that kind of a schedule in that kind of a conference, the reality, and everybody kept screaming about, well, you go undefeated in a Power 5 conference. Was it really a Power 5 conference? Mm-hmm. I mean, was it really a Power 5 conference? Because that's the other thing that we'll have to deal with is the wide discrepancy that we have in these what so-called Power 5 conferences. We're going to have a Power 2, and then we're going to have 2 middling conferences. I don't know what you're going to call them. The Big 12 and the ACC are not the Big 10 and the SEC, so that's a different level. And then and you may even have the American at that level. And then you've got the group of 5, so it's just we got to get this nomenclature kind of straightened out, but it's kind of cool to have 2 SEC teams in the Final Four again, isn't it?
Yeah, right.
It's just going to feel like a couple of SEC teams in there. You know what I mean? Clearly, ESPN rigged this to have SEC teams in the
that's interesting.
Or future SEC teams, in the national championship. Probably going to have that way. It's probably going to be that way, right?
Yeah, and 2 Big Ten teams.
And 2 Big Ten teams.
How about that?
Exactly, 2 Big Ten. So Fox is pulling for Washington and Michigan, and ESPN is pulling for Alabama, Texas. And
I gotta love it. Gotta love it. Well, always great talking to you, Tom. And we'll do it again soon. And again, everyone, you can check him out on his show. The Thom Abraham Show comes on from noon to it's noon to 2 every single day,
Central Time,
every day.
Right here, at 97.7 ESPN The Zone on the ESPN The Zone app as well. Just search 97.7 ESPN The Zone for the app there. WZZN TV and YouTube. Right here on YouTube, you can find us at WZZN TV as well.
All right, and our show today presented by Pearl River Resort and the Timeout Sports Lounge.